The Marvel Cinematic Universe returns to theaters this week with Black Widow. It has been over 2 years since the last theatrical release of the MCU with 2019's Spider-Man Far From Home, but luckily, we've had 3 MCU TV shows to tide us over since then. While each of those shows has been fantastic, I want to celebrate the MCU's return to cinemas by giving my top 10 MCU films to date. For the record, I just want to say, the MCU has amassed 23 films since its beginnings in 2008. Now, while these 23 films range in quality and my personal taste may vary from your own, that doesn't mean because it's not in my top 10 that it's not a good flick. Tough choices were made and I stand by what I picked. But as always, I'd love to hear your guys' lists as well. So, without further ado, let's take a look at my top 10 Marvel Cinematic Universe films prior to the start of Phase 4. The Incredible Hulk narrowly edges out the first Iron Man for my number 10 slot. I know I'm in the minority here, but I think from front to back this film is a little more compelling than its 2008 counterpart. Now, don't get me wrong, that isn't saying Iron Man isn't a compelling film, but it relies so much on Robert Downey Jr.'s performance that I think it covers up some of the film's overlooked blemishes. Edward Norton, Tim Roth, and William Hurt lead a very well-balanced and underrated cast. Norton's Bruce Banner may lack the eventual super science nerd angle that Mark Ruffalo would bring later on, but he still gives a great sympathetic performance. So good, in fact, that I don't find myself counting down the minutes until he turns into his giant green counterpart. There hasn't been much in this film that has gotten the kind of callbacks as other MCU films or characters, but we eventually saw the return of Hurt's General Thunderbolt Ross in 2016's Captain America Civil War. We're still waiting on the return of Liv Tyler's Betty Ross and Tim Blake Nelson's Dr. Samuel Stearns, but Ross Abomination is finally set to reappear in the upcoming Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, as well as the Disney Plus series She-Hulk. I'm not sure how much longer I'll be able to keep this film in my MCU top 10, considering what we have coming down the pike from Marvel in Phase 4 alone. However, I'll try and give props to this underrated MCU gem anytime that I can. Guardians of the Galaxy was an unknown commodity to those of us not knee-deep in Marvel Comics lore. Even director James Gunn was fairly unknown prior to being picked for the job. His dark twist on superhero films in 2010's Super might have been what proved he could make a different kind of superhero flick. So, giving the director a film with the blockbuster budget of Guardians was a big gamble, and it couldn't have paid off more. The MCU's first venture into outer space was a success across the board, delivering us great characters, expanding the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and giving us one of the best movie soundtracks of all time. This film showed that Marvel should not be doubted when introducing us to lesser-known characters. Our lineup of protagonists couldn't have been cast any better. It's their chemistry and the heart of the story that helped this film exceed expectations. Guardians' success gave us a new franchise within the franchise to get excited about going forward. At the time of its release, we were wondering just how this seemingly isolated story would connect to the events back on Earth, but in typical Marvel fashion, they were able to string together those dots later on down the line. Guardians of the Galaxy showed that the MCU was so much more than what's going on with our Earthbound heroes, and it formally introduced us to the universe's biggest bad guy in Thanos. It's fun to look back and wonder where the universe would be without this lovable band of misfits. Captain America: The First Avenger took us into the MCU's past to introduce us to the anchor of the future Avengers. The red, white, and blue wearing Boy Scout was the final piece when assembling Earth's mightiest heroes. Chris Evans embodied the heart and soul of Captain Steve Rogers and instantly made people care about the character overnight. The World War II setting was a breath of fresh air. Seeing a superhero fight against the Nazis isn't something we get to see every day, and they pulled it off. We got a great villain and performance out of Hugo Weaving's Red Skull, and it's a pity that he has never returned to the role. The rest of the ensemble shines as well, from the great Stanley Tucci and Tommy Lee Jones to the up-and-coming Haley Atwell and Sebastian Stan. The fact that the team behind this film found a way to make the ultra-patriotic character three-dimensional is to be commended, because in the hands of lesser filmmakers, this could have easily have trailed off into campy territory. Care and love was put into this film and character, and it shows through and through. Without this film working and being as well received as it was, Marvel's plans could have easily collapsed following this film. Fortunately, for Marvel and us fans, they had nothing to worry about. With their main players now on the board, the real game could begin. In 2012, The Avengers became the third highest grossing film of all time. The film was what comic book fans had always dreamed of, their favorite superheroes crossing over to team up in one gigantic blockbuster event. And an event this was. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Nick Fury, all of these Marvel heroes graced the screen together for the first time, and it was a game changer. For Marvel, it proved that their gambles and plan paid off. And to the competition, it proved that, when done right, there is a way to make a big, cohesive, shared universe. The film is well balanced, giving each of the heroes their own moments to shine, but the true magic lies in their interactions with one another. We watched as our favorite heroes butted heads philosophically and literally, only to come together to stop a common enemy. It was true movie magic. The Avengers was the 6th film in the MCU and completed what we now know as Phase 1 of the universe. From here on out, expectations were through the roof, and many wondered, once the key players went back to their solo adventures, if those films would lose their magic. And they couldn't have been further from the truth. Thor Ragnarok took the Shakespearean God of Thunder and made one of the most fun and silly movies with literal end-of-the-world implications. It was a task that few filmmakers could accomplish, and Taika Waititi passed with flying colors. Chris Hemsworth's comedy chops are on full display, and the cast around him doesn't fall short in contributing to the laughs. Tom Hiddleston is again fantastic as Loki, and Mark Ruffalo gets a chance to flex his comedy and big green muscles. The addition of Karl Urban, Tessa Thompson, and Jeff Goldblum really round out another stellar Marvel cast. And let us not forget the villainous Hela, portrayed by the fantastic Cate Blanchett, or even Taika Waititi himself as the lovable Korg. Running the gamut of emotions, Thor Ragnarok doesn't waste a moment of its runtime. While the funniest of the MCU films, it also has monstrous ramifications that ripple out to the rest of the MCU. Kicking off my top 5 is Avengers Infinity War. This film finally gives us the universe's ultimate threat in Thanos as essentially its main character. Josh Brolin didn't skimp on his performance here, and I practically forget it's him under those layers of CGI. Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, and the Guardians of the Galaxy all get brought into the fold to help the Avengers prevent the Mad Titan Thanos from collecting all of the Infinity Stones that we've seen popping up over the previous 18 films. It's fun to see the new character interactions and pairings that really make our investment in this universe and characters pay off. Rocket, Groot, and Thor? Fantastic. Tony, Peter, and Doctor Strange? Pure gold. The stakes have never been higher to this point, and we are on the edge of our seat as the heroes try and prevent half the universe from being phased from existence. I'll never forget the silence of the movie theater as the credits began to roll, and we then had to wait a whole year to see what would happen next. Spider-Man's first solo outing as a member of the MCU couldn't have been more charming and fun. Tom Holland is a great Spider-Man, and it's awesome to see him get a chance to lead a film after being a fun side addition in Captain America: Civil War. With another great supporting cast that includes Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark and a great villain in Michael Keaton's Vulture, this film immediately shot towards the top of the MCU's best outings. For a change, Peter Parker actually feels like a high schooler in a Spider-Man film. He deals with high school problems, we get the bully, the crush, the ultra-loyal best friend, and all the other awkwardness that goes with the high school experience. SpiderMan Homecoming is a well-deserved break from the world-saving entries of most of the MCU. Instead, its focus on the friendly neighborhood aspect of Spider-Man really helps bolster the charm of this film. It feels personable and deserves every bit of praise for not only being one of the best Spider-Man films we've ever had, but one of the best films in the MCU. Avengers Endgame became the highest grossing film in the world for good reason. It was the big conclusion to the 21 films that preceded it, and it essentially closed the book on what we now know as the Infinity Saga. Sure, Spider-Man Far From Home was the true close to the third phase of the MCU, but Endgame wrapped up so much for the MCU that it truly earned its namesake. Dealing with the ramifications and aftermath of the events in Infinity War, Endgame actually goes to a lot of places that I certainly didn't expect. Though saving the universe and world are usually the name of the game, it's how the heroes go about doing it that keeps us engaged and keeps the MCU from feeling stale even after 22 films. Once again, every hero that we have met along our journey through this universe gets a moment to shine, and while there are several fantastic moments of fan service, some do feel forced, and even some of the logic to elements of the film were seemingly not thought out as well as they could have been. But alas, Endgame still delivers on the goods despite those flaws, and if you were as lucky as I was to see this film in a packed theater, you know just how awesome it was to see all those heroes join forces for the final climactic battle. Captain America Civil War was the perfect mashup of what the MCU does so well. They have proved they are impeccable about making good solo films as well as phenomenal team-up efforts. So Civil War puts both on display. While many would call this Avengers 2.5, it really is a Captain America movie that just so happens to guest star the Avengers. We get the fantastic MCU debuts of both Black Panther and Spider-Man. Then we finally get to see our favorite Avengers square off against one another in what has to be one of the greatest comic book film fight scenes ever put to screen. And despite all that, the focus does mainly stay on Steve Rogers / Captain America, as it's his decision making that remains the focal point of the film. This was a film that had conflict that was earned, tension built up over several films, and the story here would branch out to new characters and places in the universe, ultimately leading into Infinity War, Endgame, and beyond. Captain America: The Winter Soldier has been my favorite MCU film since its release in 2014. It took Cap out of the 40s and away from the Avengers, placing him on an espionage adventure all his own. There's conspiracy, betrayal, and an enemy that hits too close to home for Captain Steve Rogers. This is the best single story the MCU has told. Captain America's continuing integration into the modern world is stellar, especially when modern ideals clash with the ideals Captain America had before going into the ice. Knowing who to trust becomes a big dilemma for Captain America and the film as a whole. Everything he knew, was told, and believed in is put into question. And what makes a character more compelling than dealing with deeply personal conflicts? Steve Rogers was already a fascinating character to begin with, but this film showed his true colors, intentions, and allegiances. He proves he's willing to adapt, but still draws a moral line that seems believable for his character. While the Avengers showed us just how important Captain America is to that team, Captain America: The Winter Soldier shows us just how important Captain America is to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there you have it, my top 10 MCU films before we venture into the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With more films and TV shows on the horizon, my list could drastically change even a year from now. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home are all slated to come out in 2021, while Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever will all be released in the year post Black Widow. The other announced MCU films on our horizon include The Marvels, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Fantastic Four. Oh, and in case you forgot, we are still getting those Disney Plus shows, including Ms. Marvel, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, She-Hulk, Secret Invasion, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, Ironheart Armor Wars, and I'm sure there will be more announcements to come. So, refreshing my list and your list of the MCU's best films might sound like they're going to be a reoccurring tradition, and until it's time to update them, I'll see you then.